Been a tough week. Elections in the U.S., struggles in Canada, lovely sunny days, almost summer-like, and then rising COVID numbers. School semesters completing, not sure how to make Christmas plans, and then there's just life and relationships, and sometimes you just need a break. Welcome to Jubilee United Church. We're taking a break to worship, and you're invited. And we're starting with song. You're welcome to join in. every time that we gather, virtually or in person, we commit ourselves to being a safe place. A safe place for you, for your loved ones, for your children or your parents, for your hopes or for your hurts. It is our intent to be community with you, to love you as you are. We are not the same, and we not only acknowledge that, but we celebrate the fact that we don't all vote the same way or have the same ways of speaking about God or Jesus. But we are always learning how to love each other, even when we disagree, even when we've been wrong or been wronged. We acknowledge that we have a variety of feelings about Remembrance Day. Some of us feeling a tension as we celebrate the love and sacrifice made by others on our behalf and the aspirations of peace and justice. Most of us acknowledge that war is the last option when all else fails. Today we will be remembering and honoring those who have been there for us when all else has failed, and those who have volunteered to be there if it happens again, but also providing service and hope in times of peace. We are an affirming community, which means that we are a safe and welcoming place to all those who express their identity in the LGBTQ2S+ communities. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, two-spirited, and more. I use he, his pronouns, but our community will always include those who are non-binary, identify with other pronouns, and help to broaden our understanding of gender, identity, and God. Many members of the LGBTQ2S communities have served and are serving in uniform, and very often have had to deny their fullest expression of themselves while in service. Imagine serving your country but not being able to tell them who you are. We thank them for their service and acknowledge their glorious humanity. We are all created in God's image, meant and empowered to reveal, receive, and share love. We also acknowledge that the land upon which we work, worship, and live has been covered by history and divided by maps and buried under pavement. The land upon which Jubilee Church sits was home, comfort, and faith to the first peoples, including the Petun, the Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas of the New Credit, and many others. This place that we call Toronto was a diverse and dynamic community long before any settlers arrived. We acknowledge this, not only to pay historic tribute to the people who were here then and are here now, but to remind ourselves that these roads upon which we commute were once paths made by animals seeking water. And those paths became trails for people on portage, and then streets, and now developments. There is history, wisdom, and spirit below our feet. We commit ourselves to living on this land with respect for that wisdom and love for the people who were there then and are here now. We also recognize that in the Second World War alone, about 1/3 of the indigenous male population between the ages of 18 and 45 enlisted and served in uniform. To our shame, only status Indians were officially recorded by the Canadian Expeditionary Force. We thank our siblings for their service then and their service now. We thank them for their love, and we acknowledge that Indigenous identity is defined by Indigenous peoples, not government institutions. We recognize our responsibility to do the work of reconciliation. And so here we are together, but not the same, touched by Remembrance Day, or just here to connect to community and God as we understand them. But however you came to be here, you are welcome. We are together community. We are God's children. God bless you. As we begin our announcements, we share the sad news of the death of Ruth Gorsline. John and Ruth Gorsline were always proud and supportive members of Jubilee United Church. John passed away earlier this year, and there will be a family-only service for Ruth held later this week. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family and all those who love Ruth so much. We're also sad to share with you the news that Maud Blair has died. Maud always had a very strong love for Jubilee, her Bethesda friends, and in the past couple years was always very supportive of the Jubilee Benevolent Fund. There will be a family-only graveside service later this week, and again, I recommend her family and her dear friends to your prayers. As I am sure you are aware, Jubilee United Church does meet for in-person worship on Tuesday evenings at 7:30 and the first Sunday of each month at 10:30 a.m. So our next Sunday will be December 6th. And for Tuesday evenings or Sunday services, we ask please make a reservation. Call the church office or email us. The information is there. As always, there will be a virtual check-in for kids and parents. The Zoom link button is on the Jubilee website. It's at 2 o'clock, and Haley Brown will be hosting. I hope you're as excited about this as I am, but the Jubilee Christmas Plant fundraiser is a go. Usually it's run by the Scouts, and that's not possible this year, but Liz Linus and Brian Calanda have taken on the project, and so we will have the Christmas plants that we love. Not only that, but the funds raised will go directly to Jubilee. The plants that you can order, well, they're listed here. Order forms and other information can be found on the Jubilee website. And if you need help with that, give us a call at the office. We'll straighten you out. Orders are due in by Monday, November 23rd, and pickup is on Saturday, December 5th. If delivery is necessary, we can probably figure that out too. Something big is coming, but I don't want to tell you about it yet. However, if you're on the Jubilee email list, you will get an email on Tuesday with a link to an invitation video. That invitation video will also be up on the Jubilee Church website on Tuesday. I really can't tell you more because you gotta wait for the video, but let me tell you this, there is probably a free virtual concert involved, maybe some comfort food. Definitely a chance for you to support Jubilee United Church and all the things that we do now, all the things that we hope to do in the future. Speaking of ways that you support Jubilee, we thank you so much for your financial support, and you should know that we are meeting regularly and planning to figure out how to make 2021 not just a year that we wait for COVID to end, but a year in which we thrive, that we find new ways of engagement. And your financial support make it possible not only for us to dream and vision, but to actually make things happen. For us, for the community. Thank you so much for your support.
Edward Thomas Swann was born in England on April 26, 1921. As a young child, he immigrated with his family to Canada and grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, alongside his 5 brothers. On the 10th of September, 1939, Canada declared war on Germany. A few days later, while working a job at a local grocer, 18-year-old Edward received a visit from a representative of the Canadian military. Young Edward had been a cadet and was effectively voluntold that he would be entering the Canadian Army, where he would be shipped overseas to fight in the war. He had enough time to go home and say goodbye to his parents before he was whisked away to begin his training for military service. Edward became part of Toronto's 48th Highlanders, a regiment within Canada's 1st Division. Edward was first sent to Jamaica, where he served as a sergeant in a prisoner of war camp. Later, in 1943, along with other regiments within the Canadian 1st Division, Edward was sent to the Italian front. The 1st Division landed in Sicily in July, and then slowly fought their way up the boot of Italy. Shortly before Christmas, they arrived in Ortona. The street fighting in Ortona was especially fierce, with heavy casualties on both sides. On December 23rd, Edward was severely wounded as a bullet pierced through his arm. he was pulled aside from the ongoing fire by a German medic who was able to stop the flow of blood well enough until he was able to receive fuller medical care behind the front lines. After surgery to repair his arm, the tendons were permanently shortened and the fingers of his hand remained permanently curled for the rest of his life. Edward returned to Hamilton, where he married his sweetheart Myrtle. He became a steel worker and remained employed by Burlington Steel for over 30 years. He became a father to 4 children and a grandfather of 11. I am his 5th grandchild. My favorite memories of Papa are when he and Nana would come and visit us on our farm just west of Orillia. We would sit and play word games together. As a very young child, I knew he had fought in a war, and it was something I sensed from our Remembrance Day observances at school that I should be proud of. But Papa never, ever spoke to me about being part of the Second World War. In fact, after talking with others in my family, it seems there were only 2 things he ever spoke about from that time in his life. The first was how afraid he and his friends were as they prepared for battle. That men on either side of him would soil their pants in fear. There was no shame in this, and nobody said anything about it. I can think of more than a few moments as a child when I thought, geez, if Papa went through something that scary, surely I can do this thing that I am so afraid of. The second piece that he spoke about, Papa was always very clear that it was a German, somebody from the other side, who had saved his life. He never spoke ill of German people and would correct others if he heard somebody use a slur in reference to a German person. Papa died in 1991 at the age of 70 after a long struggle with emphysema. I was 8 years old, and it was my first major experience of grief and loss. As I grew up, wearing poppies on Remembrance Day always felt like I was wearing poppies for him, for somebody I loved, and who I knew loved me. He loved and was loved, and he remains close to my heart.
Mary Stan remembers her father, Lieutenant Lionel Heron, who graduated from U of T in engineering at the beginning of the First World War and became an excellent Morse code operator. At just 24 years of age with the COTC, he became a lieutenant. At this time, Canadian soldiers were under the British order in France. Lieutenant Heron had just lost his superior officer, so he took over the duty of sending, in Morse code, a vital message to headquarters. Lieutenant Heron had just seen firsthand that a British officer was ordering line after line of Canadian soldiers to the front line where they were being brutally machine-gunned. Officer Colonel Pyorkis at headquarters honored Lieutenant Heron with the Military Cross, which was later presented by King George V at Buckingham Palace. Lieutenant Heron noted that the king was so short that he stood on a dais so that he would appear taller than all the others in the throne room. The lieutenant was awed and amazed by the beauty of the palace, especially the staircase. As I come to light the Christ candle on this Remembrance Sunday, I recognize the light of Christ in all those who have served and in the memories and love that we share because of them.
Tears, and make those pure
Remembrance Day memories flood back. Bill Payton spending over 2 years as a prisoner of war, being in Stalag Luft 3, stymieing the American POW baseball team with his pitching for the Canadian POWs, and taking part in the famous Great Escape. Captain Walter Gilroy Anderson, serving the United Church of Canada and India on the Central India mission field as staff doctor, and then when war broke out, being conscripted into the Indian Army Medical Service as Lieutenant W.G. Anderson, later to become captain, from 1941 to 46. 3.5 years of that time spent as a prisoner of war. He continued his medical work in various camps, taking care of sick and dying POWs and conscripted laborers, and on more than one occasion, the Japanese soldiers as well. After being released from the camps and having regained his freedom, Dr. Anderson, in the United Church Observer, wrote from Rangoon on September 15, 1945, "It is hard to describe one's feelings of being in a free world again." His niece Rosemarie recalls that Uncle Walter was one of the finest gentlemen I've ever had the privilege of knowing. A humble individual with a gentle, loving spirit, and so kind in every way. Whenever we would have our little chats together, I couldn't help but feel that I was in the presence of someone truly special. And it was those wonderful memories of him that gave rise to the thought that perhaps one day I too would be in a position where I could share the same qualities that I so admired in him with others who were in need of care and support.
My father, Carl Harris, served in the Navy during World War II on the Blair, a Bangor-class minesweeper. He was a sonar operator looking for mines that had been laid in shipping lanes at sea. The Blair was one of 16 minesweepers that assisted in sweeping the approaches to Normandy before D-Day and stayed to help clear German and Allied minefields in the Channel for some months afterwards. The ship returned back to Nova Scotia in October 1945, a month before my father's 21st birthday.
Shirley recalls her father, Flight Lieutenant Robert George Allen, who served in the RCF during World War II, commanding officer of a post in PEI and a radar specialist. He never talked about his time in the service very much, and that seemed to be the norm for many of the dads returning from the war. He was a gentleman par excellence, a caring, loving family man, and a devoted husband. Kathy remembers her father serving in the RAF, but rarely talking about it. He commented once, "If you were conscripted, you served where you were assigned, but if you volunteered, you could select the service you wished to serve in." He chose the Air Force because they didn't do marches and drills. He trained as a pilot and flew Lancaster bombers. One story he did tell about his career in the RAF came from his initial flight training. He was issued a parachute, which he used for the duration of his basic pilot training. And when he completed that phase of training, he was sent to another base and turned in the parachute before he left. He was asked if it had ever been deployed, and he responded no. The parachute packer said, "Well, pull the ripcord because we have to repack the chute for the next pilot anyway." So, Dad pulled it, and nothing happened. A pin in the mechanism was bent and the chute wouldn't work. He had been flying with it for over a month. After the war, he left the service and never flew a plane again. But Mom and I were treated to many critiques about landings during family trips. As we read the rolls of those who died and those who served from our communities and our families, many of the names may not be familiar. And yet someone down the street, in the office, or a classmate at school may be a descendant. They might even share that name. These names come from the rolls of Bethesda, Victoria Village, Donminster, and St. John's United Churches, as well as the hearts and lives of those who are part of Jubilee. We think of many of them as parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents in many cases. But I have asked some of our youth to read their names today, because many of them were just about the same age as they enlisted and made a commitment to be there for us when war was the only option. These people may be giants in our memories, but they were youth in their day, and we remember them.
B. Ackerman, W. G. Beckett, William Blackie, Henry Boucher, Gordon Chadwick, G. M. Cooper, R. E. Cooper, Reginald Cripps, William Darby, R. G. Darlington, A. Dury, Clifford Durston, C. Fox, W. R. Fox, G. E. Gibson, E. T. Gray, Alvin W. Huron, William Huron, Thomas Jones, John Lothar, Douglas MacDonald, Norman MacDonald, John Marshman, William Miller, Robert Moffat, A. N. Muirhead, D. G. Muirhead, Henry Palmer, Frank the First Park, Glenn Pedler, C. E. Peer, F. W. Perry, W. G. Pilkey, D. G. Ramsey, H. Ramsey, W. V. Ramsey, David Roussel, S. F. Sabin, Wesley Sabin, Ernest Sloss, B. Sparrow, Craig Campbell Tibb, John C. Tibb, Norman Tracy, James Willis, Lindsay Wilson, W. H. and W. H. White.
Alan Cosburn, Donald Boyd, Wilbur H. Duncan, Earl Hudgens, John F. Leeson, James A. Lay, Robert G. L. Lay, Harold Lewis, Norman Maggie, Alexander McPherson, James McPherson, Albert Meads, Donald Meads, Douglas Meads, Melville Meads, Ross Miller, William Miller, Clarence L. Milne, William Milne, Melville Milne, Robert Milne, Donald S. Muirhead, Glenn Northgrave, James Pollack, Alexander Semple, Francis Shadlock, Alfred Smith, Edward Smith, Arnold Trout, Gerald Walker, Eric Warman, Harry Warman, Herbert Warman, Walter Warman, Ross White, Lindsay Wilson.
Robert George Allen, Jack Best, Ed Blake, John Comrie, Jack Cranston, Vincent Cruciani, Frank Daly, Mark Daly, Robert Daly, E.S. Ralph Edwards, Dorothy Fallon, John Gorsline, Don Gorman, Jack Gowanlock, Sandra Heisa, Bob Hurst, Len Janiak, Bob Jones, Peter Kerr, Roland King, Ken Lynn, Ed Manshall, Charles Mullett, Earl Nix, Charlie Norris, Edward Partridge, Bill Payton, John Reynolds, Jim Roos, Tim Roos, Frederick Russell, Paul Russell, Stanley Russell, Sidney Russell, Murray Shantz, Peter Sharp, Herb Taylor, John Vitale, Howard Walker, Joanne Walker, Sam Walker, Dick Westwood, Griff Williams, Murray Williamson, Ryerson Allen Young.
Bill Alexander, Ron Anderson, Wynne Barker, Morley Barton, Malcolm Beverly, Bill Bice, Ken Campbell, Thomas F. Christian, Al Collins, Glenn Curran, Don Davidge, Al Davidson, Lloyd Downer, Jack Duggan, Richard Flaherty, Gary Gilroy, Arthur Harrison, Howard Harrison, Charles Jackson, Paul Jones, Harold Kennedy, Ken Kidd, Hugh Kinsman, Stan Lindsay, Art Line, Lloyd Little, Morley Lumby, Roy Lunau, Don McLean, Jim Matthews, Bill McCutcheon, Al McDermott, John McGowan, Jim McIntosh, Robert McWhinney, Grace Miller, Bud Miller, Kenneth Mills, Harry Nellis, Ed Newman, Helen Newman, Bill Palmer, Frank Pember, Harold Porteous, Bob Porter, Margaret Priest, Les Priest, Bert Proctor, Ralph Rethoret, Bill Ritchie, Doug Roblin, Don Sanders, Jack Saul, Sam Sayers, Harry Shea, George Snedden, Norman Snowden, Don Sutherland, Walter Takash, Gord Thomas, Stuart Walker, Ted Walsh, Warren Watt, Murray White, Bill Whitelock, Wayne Wilkins, Frank Williamson, Alan Youngston, and Hollis Tucker.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will be not enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore you know neither the day nor the hour."
Lord, uphold me as I uplift you, and may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts together be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I want to start today with just words from a little song that I grew up with and that you all know, I am sure. And it goes something like this. Give me oil in my lamp, give me oil in my lamp, I pray. Give me oil in my lamp, keep it burning. Give me love in my heart, keep it burning. Give me love in my heart, I pray. Give me love in my heart, keep it burning. Keep it burning till the break of day. You know that song.
But when I was growing up, I couldn't figure out what were they talking about with this little bit more oil in my lamp. Until years and years and years later, as I was reading this parable again, that's exactly what we're talking about. I need a little more oil. These attendants at this wedding that Jesus was talking about with his disciples, it was a parable he was telling them with all sorts of other meanings, but I'm focusing on the oil today. Because these attendants were supposed to be part of a wonderful procession that were going to lead the bridegroom, when he came to that house, to the place where this magnificent feast was all prepared, this banquet was ready, and they were going to have a great time, and these attendants would be part of it. But they never knew exactly when the bridegroom would arrive. And I'm tempted to think, yeah, maybe he had a little bit of Caribbean in him, because we're always, said to be a little late, like Jamaica time kind of thing. Who knows? But the bridegroom could have been late for several reasons, including a last-minute negotiation of the dowry. But point is, you never knew when he was going to get there. So these 10 attendants had their lamps and they were waiting, except that by the time he did arrive, half of their lamps had already gone out, and they were desperate. The 5 were desperate. They wanted a little bit more oil. The other 5 were not having it. You were not ready? Not my fault. Go get some oil somewhere. And they did. They actually did. But by the time they got the oil and came back to where they needed to be, it was too late. The doors had been closed. Banquet started. They were not allowed in. They were not ready. As I thought about this parable, I also thought about, again, the Caribbean. For we have a particular time of year which we call the wet season, which geographically is called the wet season. We have wet season and we have dry season. We don't have all these 4 seasons which have the magnificent colors and everything else. But the interesting thing is, again, when I was in school, the wet season had this little rhyme associated with it. So it was June too soon, July stand by, August come it must, September remember, October all over. Because of course it's the hurricane season. It's the wet season, it's the hotter season, and it's the hurricane season. Since those times, climate changes happened, so we've added November to it, and did not put a ditty with that one. But yes, we have had significant storms in November. And as a person in the Caribbean, any part of the Caribbean, you know that once the hurricane season starts, you have to be prepared. Get yourself ready, because you don't know when it's going to happen. And you've seen these tracks of the storms. They can do all sorts of things. They're projected to go that way, and then they swing north, or they swing south, or they dissipate. So you don't know. You have to be ready. And there are 2 forms of readiness. There's the long-term readiness, where you make sure your house is built properly, and they bring beams and the structural things. And I don't know anything about that piece, but it's supposed to be strapped on properly and screwed down so that the roofs don't go during the high winds. And they're supposed to be insured and all the sort of things. And then there is the short-term preparation pieces, where you make sure that you have water stocked up for all the members of your family for 2 weeks at least. You make sure that you have your batteries, your flashlights, your lamps, and whatever fuel is needed for keeping those lamps and lanterns and so on going. And non-perishable food items and medications and first aid. So at the beginning of the hurricane season, all these things are circulated and recirculated because we want people to be ready. And yet, when one of these storms comes across the Caribbean Sea coming from the Atlantic Ocean, it often devastates the countries over which it passes. I remember being in Jamaica in 1988, September 12th, 1988, Hurricane Gilbert walked across, because going at 3 miles per hour, that is not, driving force, but it walked across Jamaica with winds upward of 135 miles per hour. You know what that did to the country. And I lived in Kingston, metropolitan city. And when Gilbert was done, we were out of water, running water through our pipes. We didn't have that for 2 weeks. It's not fun. And I was in Kingston, meaning that the rural areas were way worse than me. Roofs had gone because they don't stand up to that kind of wind unless they're concrete slab and all that sort of thing. Everything was a complete mess, and I honestly do not want to go through that again. It was a disaster, unmitigated disaster. But one thing I learned from my time with the Barbados Defense Force as a military chaplain is that serving does not have to only be in times of war, but that serving is absolutely essential in times when those disasters happen. And it may be because we're in the Caribbean, where most of our countries are island nations. So when you get hit by a hurricane or storm, all it takes for some of our smaller brothers and sisters in those places is a smaller storm, and they're wiped out. The airports are closed. Everything is done. People walk around with stunned looks on their faces because they don't know what to do next. All the preparations would have been for naught. And it was in times like those that my brothers and sisters in the Defense Force stepped up to the plate. They made Proverbs 17, verse 17, a reality for me that would not have happened in any other instance. That scripture verse says, "A friend loves at all times, but a brother is born in adversity." Change brother to sibling. A sister or brother is born in adversity. We couldn't sit, at that time I was in Barbados, we couldn't sit in Barbados being comfortable with our 3 beautiful ships sitting in our harbor saying, "We're good, we were ready, we'll keep our oil." No, that was not the way we played. We knew that the whole verse about greater love has no one than this, than one would lay down their lives for their friends, had to be a reality. They would do it for us, and I knew, because been there, done that, so we would have to do it for them. And so in those situations, those ships would take turns being laden with water and all sorts of emergency supplies and going up the chain to the affected countries. And it was important because the persons living in those countries would look for, and when they saw those ships coming across the horizon, Christmas wasn't as big a deal. But they knew that that was their lifeline. These men and women with whom I served didn't know these people before then, but they became brothers and sisters in the time of adversity. They didn't go into those situations saying, you weren't prepared, but we're coming to save you anyway. They went into those situations saying, at any time, this could be me, and I know you will do the same for me. So here am I. I don't know about you, but you see this pandemic thing? I wasn't prepared for it. And in this case, there is no Barbados Defense Force or Coast Guard to come to my rescue. This pandemic has been hard because I was not prepared for working from home. I was not. That was not the deal when I started the new position I did on January the 1st. The deal was I was working from the office with all its attendant settings and everything that I needed in the office. And so my home was not prepared for me to be there all the time. And I didn't have a cat thinking, what are you doing here again? No. But my home wasn't prepared for me being there for work. Neither was I. I wasn't prepared for the whole concept of limited human contact. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for this whole concept that I am going to have to figure out how to be in a space by myself like 24/7 and then do it again the next month and then be faced with, after 6 months, 2 more months. I wasn't prepared. But you know what? I didn't have any oil for that. But you know what? God has put plans in place so that even though I struggle with all the things that have happened in those pandemic times, it's not been a catastrophe for me. Because I'm not going to lie, I still have a job, which I know a lot of people don't. And in the midst of this situation, somebody that I only met in January at work has become a sister. She calls every morning and makes sure, she's not saying it, but if she doesn't hear me, she's gonna call again, because we've decided, you know, if you don't hear me and I've not told you that I'm running off somewhere to do something, then something is wrong, and you need to do this, that, or the other. And she's become more of a friend than I ever thought. In this time, at least one other friend is now willing and still able, I think, to go on walks with me. And believe me, it is more for the social interaction than the physical effort. Because when we're done, my watch and the exercise app will tell me you only did 10 minutes of exercise in 2 hours. So it can't be for the physical activity, but the social interaction is priceless. And we have become, I would like to think, siblings through this adversity, more than just friends. So it's not about who is prepared or not. That's what I learned through the service. It is about what we're willing to do, how much oil we're willing to give, how much we're willing to share ourselves during this time of adversity for our country. culture isn't prepared either. Nobody's prepared for this thing. And it's showing up all sorts of cracks and kinks in our system. But I want to ask you today, where do you fit into all of this? Are you asking for a little bit more oil in your lamp? That's okay. Because I wasn't ready. I don't expect everybody to be ready. Are you offering a little bit more oil to someone else so that they can keep going? If you can, please do. You could be the lifeline that somebody needs during this time of adversity. Are you ready for what is the next phase of this adventure called life? Well, if you are ready, good for you, because right now I don't know that I could take on another phase of an adventure. But I am praying that our answers today are going to be grounded in the fact that each of us could find someone who we can identify as a brother or a sister who has been that for us during this time of adversity or during some other time of adversity and will be there on the other side. Fourth, this was the other piece of working in those situations of disaster relief. When those service persons, men and women, did what they needed to do and then returned to base, there was always a celebration of sorts. Granted, they were knackered, as we would say, when they got back. You give them time to rest, and then you celebrate them for the work that they have done. And there is that piece of it. So there must come a time after this when we're going to be able to celebrate together with the siblings, with the friends, with those who have mattered as we have come through this time of adversity. May it be that you recognize where you are called to offer oil, to offer service, to lay down a piece of your life. I don't want you going out there and killing yourself, but making sure that not only you come through this time of adversity, but you leave no one behind. You take them with you, so we all come through it together. And then we can all join in a song of celebration and thanksgiving because we've made it to the other side. May this be our testimony today and forevermore. Amen. Give me all in my life, give me all in my life, give me all in my life, keep give me love in my heart, keep it going. Give me love in my heart.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
And so we have been together, together with God, together with each other. And I invite you now to go into the world, to go into the spaces that need more oil, to go into the places that need more sisterly and brotherly love, and to share yourselves and the love of God with those with whom you come into contact. And may the blessing of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Comforter, be with you and with all who claim an interest in your prayers this day and forevermore. Amen.
I see trees of green and red roses too, and I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, oh, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people passing by. And I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? And they're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know, and I think